Hello and welcome. Today, we delve into a secret war fought not only with guns and bombs but with unseen waves of electromagnetic energy, an invisible battle that changed the course of history. At the heart of this conflict lies a tiny copper device no larger than a few centimeters, yet its implications threaten to turn the tide of World War II completely upside down. Could it be that the Allies developed a technology so advanced that German defenses became utterly blind overnight? Was Britain's secret weapon, the cavity magnetron, the key to unlocking a new era of warfare, one where invisibility and detection shifted forever? How did a simple piece of metal from a crashed aircraft reveal a technological leap so profound that German submarines and radar systems were rendered useless? And what does this mean for the very nature of modern conflict, where science and industry decide winners and losers? Now, imagine a device so revolutionary that it generated microwave frequencies unparalleled in power and precision, frequencies that German radar systems could neither detect nor counter. What if this tiny copper magnetron, no bigger than a cereal box, was the real reason Allied aircraft could fly through storms and darkness, pinpointing submarines and targets with uncanny accuracy? Could it be that this breakthrough in microwave technology allowed Britain to peer through clouds and fog, making the invisible visible, while German defenses remained deaf and blind? And as the German Navy watched helplessly as ships and submarines were destroyed in ways they couldn't understand, was their entire strategic outlook about to collapse? In this video, we will trace the journey from a simple scientific discovery to a weapon that turned the electromagnetic spectrum into a battlefield. We will uncover how a single technological breakthrough, conceived in secret laboratories, laid the groundwork for a new kind of warfare, one that would influence the entire course of the war and shape the modern world. So stay with us, because what you're about to learn is the story of how a tiny copper block changed everything, and how the unseen forces of science decided the fate of nations. The most astonishing revelations are just about to begin. On the 23rd of February in the year 1943, deep within the heart of Berlin, at the headquarters of the Telefunen, a moment of keen scrutiny was unfolding. Obstatel Runge, a meticulous researcher and scientist, held aloft a small magnifying glass which trembled ever so slightly in his hand as he examined a peculiar copper block that had recently been retrieved from the wreckage of an aircraft crash. This piece of metal, no larger than a few centimeters across, had been recovered from the ruins of a British aircraft about 3 weeks earlier, and its significance was now occupying his every thought. With a steady hand, he documented his initial impressions in a highly classified technical report, scribbling, "This cannot be real." The implications of what he observed were staggering. No nation, not even the most advanced in the world, had yet managed to master such an extraordinary feat of miniaturization while simultaneously achieving an unprecedented level of power output. The copper block was part of a larger, complex device that, at first glance, seemed deceptively simple, yet its potential was devastatingly profound. From the laboratory windows behind him, Runge could see the smoke billowing upward from the factories in the city, proof of the relentless Allied bombing campaigns that demonstrated their formidable air superiority. However, what his eyes revealed, what the physical evidence of the copper block represented, was that the technological divide between Germany and its enemies was far more severe than even the highest-ranking officials in the German High Command had dared to admit publicly. For this device, so small and seemingly unassuming, had been taken from a British Sterling bomber that had been shot down near Rotterdam on the night of the 2nd of February, and it measured no more than about 4 inches in length. This object was known as a cavity magnetron, a term the British used to describe a device that generated microwave radar frequencies, frequencies so high that conventional German radar detection systems could not pick them up. The magnetron's elegant simplicity masked its devastating potential. It rendered all existing German countermeasures useless overnight. Its significance was not merely in its design but in the implications it heralded for the ongoing battle of technology and intelligence. The magnetron's capabilities far exceeded anything German science had previously achieved, and yet, at this moment, neither Runge nor his colleagues fully understood the full scope of what they had uncovered. What was clear, however, was that this unassuming copper block held the key to a mystery that was costing Germany dearly. With each passing month, the Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, an officer responsible for submarine warfare, was losing around 40 of his vessels. This loss was not only a counterintuitive blow to naval strategy but was also a stark indicator of failure written in electromagnetic signals that German radar detectors simply could not perceive. The loss of submarines, men, and material was accelerating, and with each sinking, the possibility of Germany losing the Battle of the Atlantic grew more imminent. The realization was more than a tactical concern. It was a psychological upheaval that signaled a seismic shift in the war's covert technological front. The truth was beginning to seep into the consciousness of the German command. The Allies had developed an electromagnetic weapon that rendered their radar defenses practically useless, and this realization was transforming perceptions and tactics alike. On that cold, biting morning in Rotterdam, Dutch resistance members observed with particular interest as German soldiers hurriedly cordoned off the site of the crash with unusual urgency. The aircraft involved was a British Sterling bomber, designated serial number R9264, belonging to the renowned 7th Squadron of the Royal Air Force. Its mission had been only its second operational sortie when disaster struck. The plane had been targeting Cologne after having just deployed the new H-2S ground mapping radar system, which Britain had recently introduced into combat service. This particular aircraft carried a secret weapon of immense importance: the H-2S radar, a groundbreaking technological marvel designed to allow bombers to navigate and locate targets even through thick cloud cover or in darkness. At the core of this system lay the cavity magnetron, the very device that Runge was now meticulously examining. The magnetron's invention was so revolutionary that Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, himself had agonized over whether to deploy it, given the enormous strategic advantage it conferred but also the possible consequences of its misuse. The crash came just 3 days after the first combat deployment of the H-2S system, which had successfully been used in an attack against Hamburg on January 30, 1943. The fact that the device had been present on the aircraft had immediately triggered alarms among German military scientists. Within hours of the crash, General de Lufthansa Wolfgang Martini, the chief of Luftwaffe Signals Intelligence and one of Germany's most esteemed radar experts, was swiftly alerted. As the officer responsible for all German radar development and signals intelligence, Martini recognized immediately that this incident might hold the answers to long-standing questions that haunted the German military leadership. His position, overseeing Germany's entire communications and radar infrastructure, his expertise made him uniquely suited to scrutinize whatever cutting-edge technology might have been concealed within the British bomber. Recognizing the importance of this discovery, Martini promptly dispatched his most seasoned and capable technical teams to examine the wreckage at the crash site. Their initial reconnaissance yielded results that confirmed both his worst fears and his most hopeful expectations, all at once. Within the bomber's underside, they uncovered equipment unlike anything the German forces had encountered before. The collection of devices included a rotating antenna assembly, a cathode ray display system, and a highly sophisticated power supply, each component pointing towards an advanced form of radar technology. This system appeared to operate on principles that German engineers had only theorized about but considered impractical for real-world application. The existence of such a technology suggested a significant leap forward, one that could potentially change the outlook of the war. When the technicians meticulously extracted the transmitter assembly from the wreckage, specifically the part responsible for powering this enigmatic device, they uncovered something that defied current German understanding of physics and engineering. The magnetron, specifically a British model designated CV-64, consisted of a solid copper cylinder roughly 8 centimeters in diameter and about 12 centimeters long. Surrounding this core were 8 cylindrical cavities, each machined with precise symmetry around a central cathode. The entire assembly was encased within powerful permanent magnets, which appeared to serve as part of the device's core operation. At first glance, the device seemed deceptively straightforward in appearance, yet initial field testing revealed its astonishing capabilities. It appeared to generate enormous microwave power at frequencies that German equipment could neither produce nor reliably detect. The implications were staggering. Recognizing the potential significance of this technological breakthrough, Martini ordered that the device be moved immediately to Berlin under armed guard for detailed analysis. He had seen enough to understand that this discovery might explain why the German robotic units, known as Donutz's U-Boot, were suffering from unprecedented failure rates. The British had managed to achieve what German science had long declared impossible, creating a compact, powerful microwave radar system that could be mounted aboard aircraft and ships, providing detection capabilities that rendered German defenses and countermeasures ineffective. The journey from initial mystery to understanding had actually begun months earlier, deep in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. During late 1942 and early 1943, reports from U-boat commanders detailed increasingly disturbing encounters with Allied aircraft that seemed to possess supernatural detection abilities. One such report came from Captain Hans Joachim Schwanke, commanding submarine U-43, who submitted a report in December of that year that encapsulated the growing crisis. While traversing the Bay of Bisque on a moonless night, U-43 was running on the surface to recharge its batteries when suddenly, searchlights blazed from directly overhead. The crew had no warning from their MTOX radar detector, no engine noise, no visual cues, nothing to alert them to the approaching aircraft. Without any premonition, depth charges suddenly burst around the submarine, causing significant damage that forced an emergency return to port. In his war diary, Schwanke described the terrifying experience. "We were completely blind." The MTOX radar detector did not give any warning. The aircraft appeared as if it had materialized from darkness itself. Only luck saved us. We heard the bombs falling and crash-dived with seconds to spare. Our detector should have warned us minutes earlier, giving us enough time to safely submerge. Instead, we had no warning at all. Either the British have developed radar technology that our detectors cannot perceive, or there is some other new form of detection they are employing. This incident exemplified a pattern of encounters that grew more frightening as the months passed, fueling fears that the Allies had made a significant leap in electronic warfare capabilities. The realization that the British had developed a radar system capable of mounting in aircraft and ships, one that surpassed German detection technology, marked a turning point in the conflict. It suggested that the advantage in electronic detection had shifted decisively in favor of the Allies, raising questions about the future of German naval and aerial operations in the face of such advanced technology. Throughout the winter months, reports flooded into the headquarters of U-Boot, the German submarine fleet, based in Paris, each one more perplexing than the last. These accounts detailed how, seemingly out of nowhere, enemy vessels, ships and aircraft alike, appeared suddenly and were often destroyed before the submarines could even react. The most unsettling aspect was that these encounters occurred under conditions that should have made detection impossible. Sometimes, boats on the surface at night were caught unawares and sunk with brutal efficiency, despite the cover of darkness. Conversely, aircraft, which theoretically should have been hampered by weather, darkness, or obscured visibility, were operating with eerie precision, as if they had somehow bypassed conventional limits of eyesight and radar technology. One of the most troubling elements was the apparent failure of the U-boat's radar detection systems. The so-called MTOX radar detectors, which had previously provided critical warnings about aircraft equipped with older models of radar, specifically the ASV Mark II operating at wavelengths around 1.5 meters, had deteriorated into little more than worthless tools. Despite their declining performance, commanders persisted in placing their faith in these devices, trusting them to alert them to incoming threats. The dire consequences of this misplaced confidence became increasingly clear as the loss statistics piled up, painting a grim picture that would only worsen as the spring of the year approached. In the month of November in the year 1942, German U-boat submarines had sunk approximately 119 merchant ships, amounting to a total of around 729,000 tons of Allied shipping. During this same period, they also lost 13 submarines, an alarming ratio that underscored the dangerous game they were engaged in. The following month, December, saw a further decline in shipping losses, with only around 60 merchant ships, approximately 330,000 tons, being sunk, and the loss of 5 submarines. By January of 1943, these figures continued to drop. Just 37 ships were lost, although the number of U-boat submarines destroyed increased to 7. February's data was similarly troubling. 34 ships sunk, totaling roughly 170,000 tons, and 17 submarines lost, a significant jump that pointed to worsening conditions for the German fleet. Alarmingly, the once advantageous ratio of successes in Germany's favor was collapsing rapidly, signaling a shift in the naval battleground that could no longer be ignored. On the 30th of January, 1943, Admiral Karl Donitz was promoted to Commander-in-Chief of the entire German naval forces, a position that placed him at the helm of the war effort's strategic planning. Despite this higher command, he maintained direct oversight of U-boat operations through his dedicated staff. His headquarters were filled with detailed plots and maps tracking every U-boat's position, every convoy route, and each engagement. Yet, the patterns emerging from this meticulous data defied traditional naval logic. U-boat submarines, which should have been able to approach convoys under cover of darkness and remain undetected, were being intercepted and destroyed before they could even launch their attack. Likewise, boats navigating the Bay of Bisque under the veil of night were being targeted and bombed with astonishing accuracy, as though their precise location had been known in advance. Even submarines operating submerged during daylight hours, an inherently stealthy tactic, were somehow being tracked and subjected to depth charges. Allied aircraft, equipped with increasingly sophisticated technology, seemed to possess supernatural abilities to locate submarines in conditions where visual detection was supposed to be impossible. During many of these attacks, weather conditions such as thick cloud cover, fog, or storms, which should have rendered visual spotting impossible, did not hinder the enemy's ability to strike with devastating effectiveness. The precision of these assaults was almost supernatural, defying all the conventional understanding of wartime detection and engagement. Among the key figures trying to understand these baffling developments was Captain Gah Hessler, the son-in-law of Captain Kapitan Gah Hessler Donuts, who had married his daughter Ursula in November of 1937. Hessler served as the first staff officer at U-boat headquarters and dedicated weeks to analyzing combat reports, seeking an explanation for the sudden and inexplicable losses. The pattern was consistent but profoundly perplexing. Allied detection capabilities appeared to have advanced dramatically over a very short span of time, just from late 1942 into early 1943, implying the rise of new technological tools rather than mere improvements in tactics or training methods. The critical question that haunted Hessler and all of Donuts's staff was, what could possibly see through darkness, dense clouds, and fog, conditions that should have rendered visual or radar detection impossible? What kind of technology could detect a small submarine's conning tower from miles away, or track its periscope wake and snorkel exhaust in circumstances where human observers would be utterly blind? The list of questions multiplied exponentially without any immediate answers, fueling growing concern and urgency within the German command. Throughout the months of January and February of 1943, a series of intense discussions took place among German military scientists and engineers, revealing a concerning level of ignorance about the true state of Allied technological advancements. These conversations also exposed a troubling complacency regarding German technological superiority, which many believed to be unassailable at the time. A prevailing belief among German radar experts was that no radar system could effectively operate at wavelengths shorter than approximately 50 centimeters, due to fundamental limitations in power generation technology. They argued that the vacuum tube technology available to them simply could not produce sufficient power at higher frequencies, making the development of shorter wavelength radar systems impractical and unlikely to be useful for military purposes. The existing detection systems, such as the so-called MTOX detectors, were designed specifically to identify Allied radar signals operating at wavelengths near 1.5 meters. These detectors could, in theory, alert German fighters and defenses to approaching enemy aircraft by sensing the electromagnetic emissions produced by their radar systems. The principle was straightforward. These detectors would give commanders a warning of several minutes, enabling them to execute quick crash dives and evade detection before the enemy aircraft could close in for attack. Yet, by this time, it had become painfully clear that these systems no longer provided the adequate warning they once had. Their effectiveness was deteriorating rapidly. This led to a critical question that could not be ignored. What had changed in Allied capabilities? Speculation circulated among scientists and military strategists about the nature of this change. Some believed that the Allies might have developed infrared detection techniques capable of sensing the heat signature of aircraft engines, specifically the exhaust gases of diesel-powered engines. Others proposed the possibility of acoustic detection, though many considered this implausible given the vast operational distances involved. A few experts entertained the theoretical notion that centimetric radar, which operates at much shorter wavelengths and utilizes advanced magnetron technology, could be in use. However, this idea was dismissed as impractical due to the significant engineering challenges involved. Germany's own research into such systems had led to the conclusion that deploying centimetric radar was neither feasible nor tactically advantageous enough to justify the enormous resources required for development. German engineers and scientists believed that they had already addressed the key technological hurdles and that Britain, suffering from years of relentless strategic bombing which had severely damaged its industrial base, could not possibly have made significant breakthroughs in radar technology beyond what they themselves had achieved. The consensus among the experts was that the British could not have developed radar systems more advanced than their own, and therefore, any new Allied detection method must be something entirely different, possibly a combination of multiple detection techniques working synergistically. This confident assumption, that Britain's technological edge was limited and that German engineering outstripped the Allies, began to crumble when a crucial breakthrough arrived in the form of the magnetron. The magnetron, a revolutionary microwave generator, was brought to Berlin on the 5th of February, 1943, accompanied by comprehensive photographs of the complete H2S installation and detailed reports from a crash site where the device was uncovered. Its arrival marked a turning point. In the days following, Runge, a leading figure among Germany's microwave specialists, was tasked with assembling what would soon become known as the Rotterdam Working Group, or alternatively, the Arbeitenschaft Rotterdam. This team of expert scientists and engineers was charged with the critical mission of thoroughly examining this new device, determining precisely what it was, how it functioned, and most importantly, what new capabilities it might afford the Allies. Their initial meeting was scheduled tentatively for either the 22nd or 23rd of February, to be held at the offices of Telefunken in Berlin. The very first examination, conducted on the 6th of February, revealed fundamental insights into the magnetron's operating principle. Within hours of inspection, the team observed that the cylindrical cavities within the magnetron acted as resonant chambers. These cavities were capable of generating, sustaining, and amplifying electromagnetic oscillations, an essential breakthrough that heralded the possibility of much shorter wavelength radar, or centimetric radar, which could operate at ranges and resolutions previously thought unattainable. This discovery marked the beginning of a new technological era, one that would challenge existing assumptions and threaten German strategic dominance if successfully exploited by the Allies. New and completely unprecedented wavelength that lay far beyond the detection capabilities of German electronic surveillance systems. It was as if the British had developed a form of invisible sight, allowing their radars to peer through the clouds and darkness undetected, revealing targets with startling precision. Throughout that period, the Germans relied heavily on their meter-wave radar technology, which was effective within its own range but utterly incapable of sensing the higher frequency signals now being employed by the Allies. Their existing warning systems, such as the MTOX, were calibrated to pick up signals oscillating within a wavelength window of roughly 1 to 3 meters, specifically tuned to the frequencies of former enemy radar systems. These devices could recognize any signals within their designated spectrum, but the new centimetric radar operated at a wavelength of just over 9 centimeters, placing it out of reach of German detection and interception. This technological leap had profound consequences. The Allied radars, especially the ASV Mark III system, could detect submarines from a distance of 20 meters in any weather condition, be it rain, fog, or storm. Their small radar cross-section, which had long been a saving grace for German submarines, was rendered irrelevant against this high-frequency, highly sensitive system. The centimetric wave radar could reliably identify a submarine's conning tower or periscope from notable distances, turning previously stealthy underwater vessels into visible targets. Compounding the threat was the fact that the microwave emissions produced by these centimetric radars were practically invisible to German radar warning receivers. The existing detection equipment, including the MTOX system relied upon by the Germans, functioned effectively only within the meter wavelength band, meaning it could not detect signals radiated in the centimetric spectrum. This technological disconnect left the Germans essentially blind to the new wave of Allied radar development, unable to track or respond to the high-frequency signals that were now revolutionizing aerial and naval warfare. The full extent of this breakthrough became clear after the Allies managed to recover fragments of the new radar system from wreckage and debris, which Runge's team meticulously reverse-engineered over 2 grueling weeks. Their efforts uncovered the intricate design of the H2S system, powered by a magnetron that emitted high-frequency waves to scan the ground and produce detailed maps displayed on a plan position indicator, or PPI. This device showcased coastlines, cities, rivers, and terrain features with astonishing clarity, effectively providing pilot crews with an electronic map that could be read even in total darkness or through thick clouds. This system was primarily devised for navigation during strategic bombing missions, enabling Pathfinder aircraft to precisely mark targets for subsequent waves of bombers regardless of adverse weather conditions that previously hindered visual identification. Consequently, Allied bombers could now strike targets across Germany even when cloud cover or poor visibility made traditional navigation impossible. The implications, however, extended far beyond strategic bombing. They laid the foundation for a new era in anti-submarine warfare. The same cavity magnetron technology that powered the ground mapping and navigation radars was repurposed into the airborne ASV Mark III radar, designed specifically for searching beneath the ocean surface. From a distance of 20 meters, in any weather, day or night, the system could detect a submarine's conning tower, a tiny target that once relied on stealth for survival. The submarine's small radar cross-section was no match for this high-frequency, centimetric wave radar, which could detect even the most elusive targets with remarkable reliability. Crucially, this microwave-based radar emitted signals that were completely silent to German detection systems. All the German electronic warning systems, including the MTOX, were confined to the meter waveband, making them incapable of sensing the high-frequency centimetric emissions. As a result, the Allies gained a covert advantage that significantly increased their ability to locate and track submarines without alerting their enemies, fundamentally changing the balance of naval warfare. In summary, this leap in radar technology represented a turning point in the war effort. By shifting from traditional, less sensitive systems to the high-frequency centimetric radar, the Allies not only enhanced their aerial navigation and ground mapping capabilities but also unleashed a new dimension of maritime dominance. This invisible technological cloak, operating in a frequency range the Germans could neither detect nor counter, played a critical role in transforming the battlefield and sealing the fate of German submarines and surface vessels alike. In the midst of World War II, the German military and industrial leadership faced a shocking technological revelation that would profoundly impact the course of the conflict. The findings presented by the Rotterdam Working Group on February 23, 1943, uncovered that the British had achieved a radar frequency detection capability far surpassing anything the Germans had previously encountered or could counter. Specifically, the British radar receivers operated at a frequency approximately 17 times higher than the maximum the German warning systems could detect, rendering German defenses practically blind to this new threat. This technological surprise was not only unexpected but also utterly devastating, as it exposed the vulnerabilities of the German defensive infrastructure, which had become outdated and ineffective without their even realizing it. The report was delivered to the highest echelons of the German war effort, including key military and industrial figures. While there is no direct evidence to confirm that prominent leaders such as Reich Marshal Hermann Göring or Admiral Donitz attended this particular technical meeting, both of them were definitely brought up to speed regarding the critical findings. Representatives from all major German electronics manufacturers, including engineers from firms like Telefunken, Siemens, AEG, and Lorenz, participated in the session, highlighting the significance of the discovery. The atmosphere in the conference room at Telefunken's headquarters was tense and serious, reflecting the gravity of the situation. The presentation was officially opened by a senior signals officer from the Luftwaffe, who declared that they faced an unprecedented technological breakthrough by the Allies. The officer explained that the cavity magnetron, a device essential for advanced microwave radar, represented an advancement in microwave generation that far exceeded German technological capabilities by at least 3 years of standard development time. More critically, he emphasized, this new device enabled radar detection systems against which Germany had no effective countermeasures or defenses. This revelation marked a pivotal turning point. It meant that if the British could manufacture these magnetrons in large quantities, and the quality of production suggested they already were, then every Allied aircraft and naval vessel could be equipped with radar systems beyond German reach. Consequently, Germany's long-standing warning receivers, which relied on meter-wave radar systems, were rendered virtually obsolete. The detailed specifications of the CV-64 magnetron were shared during the presentation. It was described as a compact device with 8 resonant cavities precisely machined into a copper block, operating at a frequency of 3.3 GHz with a wavelength of about 9.1 centimeters. Its peak power output was an impressive 40 kilowatts, and it was designed for robust use, suitable for installation aboard aircraft. The construction was not only compact but also built to withstand the rigors of combat environments, and the manufacturing quality indicated a reliable, established production process rather than experimental prototypes. The implications of this technological leap were nothing short of catastrophic for the Germans. If the British could manufacture these magnetrons en masse and maintain the high quality necessary for operational deployment, then every Allied aircraft and naval vessel could be outfitted with radar systems that Germany's existing defenses could not counter. This meant the Allied forces could effectively see through German fog of war, detect and avoid defenses, and carry out strategic bombing with unprecedented accuracy, regardless of weather conditions. The extensive network of German radar installations that operated within the meter wavelength range was increasingly rendered ineffective and obsolete. German night fighters, anti-aircraft defenses, and naval vessels, all relying heavily on radar technology, were now operating at a profound disadvantage, one generation behind the technological curve. When Hermann Göring was briefed on these findings, possibly at the Humboldt-Strasse Flak Tower in Berlin, where the reassembled H-2S system was demonstrated, his reaction was said to be one of deep consternation. The man who, in 1939, had confidently declared that no enemy aircraft would ever be able to bomb Germany, was now confronted with the stark reality that British bombers could navigate and strike with precision through any weather, employing technology that Germany could neither detect nor defend against. This revelation threatened to turn the tide of the air war. Admiral Donitz, when informed through his staff channels, understood the full gravity of these developments even more clearly than many others in the German High Command. The magnitude of the British advancement in microwave radar technology was a stark reminder that German naval and aerial defenses could soon become irrelevant against an enemy equipped with such sophisticated systems. The realization that the Allies had leapfrogged German technological progress by an entire generation was both alarming and sobering, forcing a re-evaluation of Germany's strategic and technological priorities moving forward. During the initial 2 months of the year 1943, the German submarine fleet, commonly known as the U-boat force, had suffered a staggering loss of 39 vessels. Breaking down these figures further, records indicate that in the months of January and February alone, 17 submarines were lost, with specific counts of 7 in January and 10 in February, leading to a total of 17 for the second month. Adding in the losses from December, though those are rarely included in the same immediate analysis, the numbers increased, bringing the total of recent submarine casualties over the 3-month period to an even more alarming 39 vessels. If this destructive trend persisted unchecked, it would inevitably spell the downfall of the U-boat campaign within a matter of months, potentially crippling Germany's underwater offensive capabilities and undermining their strategic objectives in the Atlantic. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Captain Zur Eberhardgott, who had served as the operational chief of the submarine fleet, often called Donuts by his colleagues, and who had been promoted to the rank of admiral in March of 1943, dedicated himself to an in-depth and meticulous analysis of the ongoing U-boat operations. The data painted an increasingly bleak picture of the German naval effort. In the first quarter of the year, the rate at which U-boat vessels were being lost far exceeded the rate at which new submarines could be built and commissioned, despite the fact that German shipyards were churning out somewhere between 20 to 24 new boats each month. This discrepancy indicated that the fleet was not merely shrinking but doing so at a rate that threatened operational continuity. More troubling still was the realization that the loss of skilled crews was outpacing the ability of the German military to train new sailors swiftly enough to fill the ranks. Experienced submariners, whose knowledge and skills were critical to effective underwater combat, were dying faster than German training programs could produce replacements. This confluence of material and personnel losses underscored an impending collapse of the submarine warfare effort. In the wake of these disconcerting data, the gathered military leaders and scientists drew several sobering conclusions, which would later be documented in secret reports captured by the advancing Allied forces. First, they recognized that Germany's technological ambitions to develop a cavity magnetron, an essential component for advanced radar systems, would be unattainable in operationally significant quantities before the year 1944 at the earliest. The process of manufacturing the resonant cavities, which required highly specialized copper alloys, along with the production of powerful permanent magnets made from cobalt, materials that Germany lacked in sufficient amounts, and the extensive manufacturing expertise needed, were all beyond the immediate German industrial capabilities. Even if an emergency effort was launched, establishing production lines for these advanced components would take many months, making rapid deployment impossible. Second, the development and deployment of effective countermeasures against the new radar technology would demand at least half a year. Designing a new generation of radar warning receivers capable of detecting the centimeter-scale microwave emissions, specifically those at 3.3 GHz, was theoretically feasible. Still, the process of producing, installing, and integrating such receivers into the entire U-boat fleet would extend well into the year 1944. Given Germany's limited experience with microwave technology and the complexity of building receivers sensitive enough to detect signals in the 3 GHz range, the technical hurdles were formidable. Third, and most critically, the intelligence suggested that the Allies had already made significant strides in this domain. It was almost certain that they possessed variants of this radar technology that exceeded the capabilities of anything the Germans could currently counter. For example, the device spotted aboard the Rotterdam, a vessel that was part of the Allied fleet, operated at a wavelength of 9.1 centimeters. It was highly probable that Allied scientists had already developed, or were actively working on, systems operating at a shorter wavelength of 3 centimeters. Such advancements would make any new German countermeasures obsolete before they could even be deployed in the field. This technological race was not merely difficult, it was effectively unwinnable within the current timeframe of the war, given the Allies' head start in research, their superior industrial capacity, and the rapid pace of technological development. The Germans faced an insurmountable challenge rooted in both the speed of enemy innovation and their own technological and industrial limitations. Admiral Donitz absorbed these highly alarming briefings with a growing sense of understanding about the catastrophic trajectory facing his command. His headquarters, which had been relocated to the Paris region in March of 1942, after the daring raid by the Saint-Lazare Commando exposed vulnerabilities at their previous command post in Laurent, maintained detailed and comprehensive maps tracking every engagement, every loss, and every tactical development. These maps adorned the walls of the operations room and told a story more vividly than any statistic could. Red pins marked the positions of the U-boats across the North Atlantic, and these markers had thinned dramatically over recent months. Conversely, blue pins, indicating Allied convoy routes, appeared to flow freely through regions where Wolf the intelligence gathered through intercepted communications and reconnaissance had revealed a stark truth. The Germans' hopes of maintaining their dominance at sea were rapidly diminishing. They had observed, with growing alarm, the increasing presence of black pins, markers used to denote their U-boat losses, concentrated along vital transit routes crossing the Bay of Biscay, as well as within operational sectors where their submarines encountered well-coordinated Allied air patrols. Donitz, the commander of the German U-boat fleet, confided to his senior officers in grim briefings that they had essentially been fighting against an adversary whose full capabilities they had failed to comprehend. He acknowledged that the Allies had neutralized every advantage they had once relied upon, largely through technology that was still largely unknown to them. The element of surprise, especially during night raids, had lost its edge, because the enemy's radar systems permitted full visibility even under the cover of darkness. The vastness of the Atlantic no longer provided the sanctuary it once had. Radar could even detect a conning tower from a distance of 20 meters, rendering concealment almost impossible. Their radar warning systems, which once offered a sense of security, now provided false reassurance. Instead of acting as a safeguard, these warnings often gave a misleading impression of safety, while in reality, they failed to offer effective defense against the emerging threats. Faced with this daunting reality, Donitz and his staff were confronted with a chilling reality. Their previous strategies were no longer viable. They had to confront a crucial question: what immediate measures could be taken to stem the tide of losses? As German industry hurried to develop countermeasures that might eventually offset Allied technological superiority, in a race that might not bear fruit until the year 1944, Hessler, one of the tactical advisors, proposed several urgent adaptations. He emphasized that all U-boat commanders must be explicitly informed that radar warning signals were unreliable, and thus, should not be fully trusted as they could no longer be relied upon for comprehensive air attack alerts. To mitigate the threat, vessels were ordered to remain submerged for as much time as possible, surfacing only when absolutely necessary, to recharge batteries or to transit at higher speeds. The idea was to minimize their exposure to radar detection. In addition, the anti-aircraft armament on the submarines was to be increased across the fleet, though this was recognized as a desperate and somewhat futile measure against aircraft that could detect the submarines long before they could react or retaliate. Most critically, Donitz and his staff began preparing for a grim possibility: that the U-boat campaign in the Atlantic might soon reach an unsustainable point. If losses continued to grow at their current alarming pace, and if Allied shipbuilding efforts continued to accelerate, building new vessels faster than the Germans could sink them, the strategic calculus would become impossible to sustain. The Germans would face a war of attrition that could not be won, as they struggled to sink merchant ships faster than their adversaries could replace them. The month of March in the year 1943 marked both the peak and the turning point for Donitz's U-boat fleet. It was during this month that the largest convoy battles of the entire war took place, involving massive wolf packs numbering between 30 and 40 submarines each, aiming to overwhelm Allied escort defenses through sheer numerical superiority. For a fleeting moment, it seemed that this tactic might still hold some hope of success, despite the relentless technological advancements made by the Allies. In the middle of March, the convoys HX-229 and SC-122, sailing together through the treacherous waters of the North Atlantic, faced an onslaught by approximately 40 U-boats divided among 3 wolf packs. This fierce confrontation spanned from the 16th to the 20th of March, and its outcome was devastating. Over these few days, 21 merchant ships, carrying a total of 141,000 tons of vital supplies, were sunk. This represented the highest loss of merchant tonnage in any single convoy engagement during the entire war. The strategic assessment issued internally by British Admiral T highlighted the gravity of the situation. He stated that Germany had, during this period, come closer than ever before to severing Britain's vital Atlantic supply lines. However, despite the tactical gains, the toll on the German submarines was immense. The attack on these convoys resulted in the loss of at least one U-boat, the U-384, which was definitively destroyed, along with several others that suffered damage. Looking at the broader picture for the month of March, the statistics painted a grim tableau for the German U-boat fleet. Between 12 and 15 submarines were lost during the month, depending on the criteria used for classification. Many of these losses happened outside the major convoy battles, in isolated encounters and in regions not directly associated with the large-scale attacks. Even when the Germans achieved some tactical success, the mathematics of their situation became increasingly inescapable. The relentless attrition, coupled with the rapidly expanding Allied shipbuilding capacity, during the course of the Battle of the Atlantic in World War II, the Allied forces experienced fluctuating success in their efforts to neutralize German merchant shipping via the submarine menace, known as the U-boats. Early in the campaign, the German U-boats appeared to enjoy significant tactical victories by sinking sizable tonnage of Allied merchant vessels, thus disrupting supply lines across the Atlantic. However, as the war progressed, a more complex strategic picture began to emerge, revealing a gradual deterioration of the U-boat's overall effectiveness. One of the key factors contributing to this shift was the rapid expansion and improved efficiency of Allied shipbuilding programs. By the mid-1940s, the United States had launched an extensive ship construction effort, with shipyards capable of producing merchant vessels at an unprecedented pace. Notably, the Liberty ship program dramatically reduced construction times from over 200 days in 1941 to an average of approximately 42 days by 1944. While individual ships, such as the SS Roberty Epiree, which was built in a record-breaking span of just over 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes in November of 1942, garnered attention, such feats were primarily propaganda tools. They showcased technological and organizational prowess but did not reflect the typical manufacturing rate across the waterfront. Despite these remarkable individual achievements, the overall production capacity of American yards was vast. At the height of their output, around 3 Liberty ships could be launched roughly every 2 days, translating to an average of approximately 1.5 ships per day. This volume of construction meant that the Allies could replace wartime losses at a rate far surpassing the German U-boats' ability to sink them. For each U-boat, with an average sinking capacity of roughly 3,000 to 5,000 tons per vessel before being destroyed, the rate of ship production rendered the German campaign strategically ineffective. As long as American and Allied shipyards maintained this pace of replacement, the U-boat offensive was, in reality, a strategic failure masked by tactical successes on a day-to-day basis. The fundamental challenge the U-boat campaign faced was maintaining an unfavorable exchange ratio, losing more tonnage than was gained, while avoiding losses that the Germans could not recoup. The true turning point in this ongoing struggle occurred in May of 1943, a month which became ominously known among U-boat crews as Black May. Throughout that month, Allied air and surface forces, equipped with advanced radar systems such as the centimetric ASV, Mark III radar, and the Type 271 shipboard radar, launched an unrelenting offensive against the U-boat wolfpacks with unprecedented success. One of the most significant convoy battles that marked this turning point was the engagement for Convoy Ons 5, which took place in late April and early May. This slow-moving convoy, comprising 43 merchant ships protected by 16 escort vessels, faced an attack from approximately 30 German U-boats. The results were disastrous for the Germans. They succeeded in sinking between 12 and 13 merchant ships but suffered the loss of 6 or 7 U-boats themselves, with an additional 5 to 7 damaged so severely that they were rendered inoperable. This encounter was notable because, for the first time, the U-boat force suffered losses approaching their successes, indicating a fundamental shift in the strategic balance. Following this pivotal confrontation, the tide continued to turn against the Germans. A mere 2 weeks later, the convoy SC-130 proved the full extent of Allied dominance. In this engagement, of the 37 or 38 merchant ships, not a single vessel was lost despite aggressive attacks from between 25 and 33 U-boats deploying 3 patrol lines. The German submarines sustained the loss of approximately 3 to 5 U-boats, including the noteworthy U-954. This decisive Allied victory signaled the end of the most seriously threatened convoy of the year 1943, confirming that the Allies had gained a decisive upper hand at sea. Throughout the month of May, German U-boats continued to suffer relentless losses. On the very 1st of May, the U-209 was located and sunk in the North Atlantic with all 46 crew members aboard lost. The following day, U-447 and U-663 were both destroyed by Allied forces, further depleting the U-boat fleet. May 6 saw the sinking of U-465 and U-563, while on the 11th of May, U-89, U-86, and U-456 all met their end. May 12 was particularly tragic, as U-528 was depth-charged with all hands lost, and on May 15, U-176 was destroyed. The losses continued unabated with the fall of U-273 and U-954 on May 19. Of particular personal significance was the loss of U-954, a Type 70 boat commanded by Captain Lieutenant Odo Loe, and bearing among its crew the youngest son of Admiral Donitz, Lieutenant Zuri Peter Donitz. This vessel was engaged in attacking convoy SC-130. Contact with the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars and depth charges was a constant threat in the depths of the Atlantic theater. The Hedgehog weapon, which had been introduced in 1942, marked a notable advancement in anti-submarine warfare tactics, offering a significant improvement over the traditional depth charges used earlier. Unlike the older devices, which detonated at predetermined depths regardless of whether they hit the target, Hedgehog projectiles were designed to explode only upon contact. This contact firing mechanism meant that each explosion served as a confirmation of a direct hit rather than just a disturbance in the water that could complicate sonar tracking. In a tragic instance, the submarine U-1954 was destroyed with all 47 crew members aboard, their lives ending at coordinates 54.54 degrees north and 34.19 degrees west. The loss was communicated through secure telegraph channels, marking a somber moment in the ongoing conflict. The U-1954 had been attacked and ultimately sunk by British escort vessels, specifically the HMS Jed and HMS Sennen. The effective use of the Hedgehog weapon was evident in the fact that it had achieved a direct hit, sealing the fate of the submarine and its crew. There were no survivors from this tragedy. Despite the devastating personal loss, the command did not halt operations or allow grief to impede their duties. The assumption was that there would be time for mourning after the war, especially if Germany's hopes of victory remained intact. At this critical juncture, the focus had to remain on the more pressing responsibilities, specifically the approximately 40,000 submariners under his command, the living sailors whose lives still depended on the decisions made at the top. The emotional blow of losing his son, a member of that force, was profound, yet it could not be permitted to interfere with the operational imperatives at a moment when the entire U-boat campaign was perilously close to collapse. By the 22nd of May in 1943, the once formidable U-boat fleet had suffered heavy losses. Depending on the classification methodology used, between 41 and 43 submarines had been lost within that month alone. Official lists, such as those maintained on uboat.net, documented 42 boats sunk, with a total of 10,650 men killed and 1,837 survivors. Other sources cited slightly different figures, either 41 combat losses or, in some accounts, 43 including vessels that had been stricken from operational service. Regardless of the precise number, these losses equated to roughly a quarter of the entire operational U-boat fleet, an unsustainable blow that rendered the month catastrophic for German naval operations, threatening the very fabric of their strategic efforts in the Atlantic. In response to this alarming situation, Admiral Donitz summoned his operations staff to an emergency meeting on May 24, 1943. The plot board displayed a scene of unprecedented disaster, an entire quarter of the operational fleet wiped out in merely 3 weeks. The casualty rate was surpassing any previous record, with experienced commanders falling at a rate that outpaced the ability of training schools to replace them. Newly commissioned submarines, still in their infancy, were being lost on their initial patrols before their crews had the chance to master vital combat survival techniques. The youngest officers, those aged 23 and 24, who would have carried the force into the battles of 1944 and 1945, were drowning in the Atlantic waters, their young lives cut short and their potential forever lost to the unforgiving depths. Faced with such devastating losses, Donitz had to make a decision that weighed heavily on his conscience, the most painful choice of his military career. He took to drafting an order that effectively signaled a temporary surrender in the Battle of the Atlantic. Addressing all submarines at sea, he announced that, due to the overwhelming superiority of Allied detection technologies and the pervasive air cover dominating the battlefield, operations in the North Atlantic would be suspended immediately. All submarines present in that region were instructed to withdraw to positions southwest of the Azores. Those boats still en route to their operational zones were ordered to proceed to designated base ports, known as BISC ports. Further offensive operations would be deferred until the development of improved detection equipment and reinforced anti-aircraft defenses made the campaign viable once more. This decision was not a surrender in spirit, but a frank acknowledgement of the harsh realities confronting the Kriegsmarine. The immediate impact was staggering. Statistics for June of 1943 showed only 17 merchant ships had been sunk compared to previous months, marking a dramatic decline in their prowess and a sobering recognition of the mounting challenges faced by the submarine force in maintaining their campaign's momentum. Extended the story, illustrating the relentless tide turning against the German U-boat fleet, but the core truth remained the same. By mid-1943, the German Naval Command recognized with bitter clarity that their efforts were increasingly futile. Despite their unwavering bravery and tactical ingenuity, the technological advancements of the Allies had rendered the once formidable U-boat menace outdated and ineffective. The supply lines that once teetered on the brink of collapse by the onset of that year had since become secure, marking a turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. Throughout the war, enormous convoys assembled at American ports, their journey protected by cutting-edge technology that had managed to neutralize Germany's most potent armament, the U-boat threat. These vast conglomerations of ships, laden with vital supplies, were now shielded by innovations in radar and sonar, which had rendered the U-boat's stealth tactics increasingly obsolete. Yet, even as the strategic outlook shifted in favor of the Allies, the human cost on the German submarine crews continued to mount relentlessly. Over the entire duration of the conflict, approximately 40,000 men served aboard U-boats, and tragically, around 30,000 of them lost their lives. This translated into an astonishing casualty rate of roughly 75%, the highest among any military service engaged during the war, on either side. The fate of these sailors was often brutal and tragic. Many perished beneath the crushing pressure of steel cylinders, victims of depth charges that detonated beneath them, collapsing the water around their vessels. Others suffocated when their life support systems failed after prolonged periods of being submerged during relentless attacks. Still, many were consumed by flames ignited by combat damage, the fiery inferno claiming them in the dark depths. Some succumbed to the icy waters of the North Atlantic, freezing to death in the bitter cold, while others cooked alive in the tropical waters off other theaters of the war, trapped beneath the surface in their submersibles for hours on end. They faced these harrowing dangers fully aware that their equipment was inferior and that their missions were becoming increasingly pointless as the technological advantage shifted decisively to the Allies. Despite the bleakness of their circumstances and the mounting losses, the German sailors persevered. Their dedication was driven both by a profound sense of duty and a recognition that abandoning their posts would free Allied air and naval forces to concentrate elsewhere, thereby hastening the overall collapse of German resistance across multiple fronts. Their continued fighting, therefore, was not merely a matter of individual bravery but also a strategic choice aimed at delaying defeat, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The psychological toll of these circumstances was painfully evident in the interrogation reports of captured U-boat crews, collected throughout the summer and fall of 1943. Initially, Allied intelligence officers were perplexed by the widespread defeatism they encountered among the prisoners, sailors who, just months earlier, had been fervent believers in inevitable German victory. Over time, however, analysts recognized a profound and disturbing phenomenon. These men had not been defeated in traditional combat. Instead, they had become victims of scientific and technological obsolescence. Their once advanced tactics and equipment had been outstripped by Allied innovation, rendering their vessels nearly invisible to the radar and sonar systems that now dominated naval warfare. The reports from interrogations of commanders like Captain Lieutenant Vera Henker, who commanded the U-515, shed stark light on this tragic transformation. Henker had enjoyed notable success during his patrols, sinking multiple merchant ships and earning the prestigious Knight's Cross for his achievements. His boat's career, however, came to an abrupt end on the 9th of April, 1944, when it was sunk by a U.S. task group comprised of the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal and accompanying destroyers. Of the roughly 40 crew members aboard U-515, including Captain Henker, many were captured and later interrogated at Fort Hunt, Virginia, an intelligence center officially designated P.O. Box 1142. Henker's detailed testimony, which remained classified until 1985, later provided a sobering account of the German understanding of their technological decline. During sessions held between May 3 and June 15 of 1944, Henker explained that by mid-1943, the German military recognized with unsettling clarity that they had already lost the war's technological race. He emphasized that this was not due to a lack of courage or skill among the German sailors. Rather, it was because Allied technological superiority was systematically dismantling every advantage they once held. We knew by the middle of 1943, Henker confided, that the war was lost, not because we lacked bravery, but because their technology was destroying us from within. He described how the new radar systems rendered the German detection equipment, such as the MTOX detector, essentially useless against the evolving Allied radar. The crews had nicknamed the MTOX detector the grave bell, because when it failed to warn of approaching aircraft, it signaled only their impending doom, their funerals. Later, more advanced the advent of centimetric radar, a revolutionary technology in maritime warfare, arrived too late to significantly aid the German U-boat fleet during the height of their operations in World War II. While the NACOS system, introduced in September of 1943, was capable of theoretically detecting the emerging Allied radar emissions, its practical effectiveness was limited. Even when it did successfully identify enemy signals, the detection range was painfully short, merely a few hundred meters, far less than the distance at which Allied aircraft could observe and engage us from beyond visual range. This meant that, in most cases, by the time our crew received a warning and attempted to dive, the attacking aircraft were already circling above, calling in destroyers and other surface ships to unleash depth charges. Our efforts to escape relied heavily on luck and timing, but the truth was that we often had no chance to see the threat coming until it was too late to mount a defense. The technological gap was stark. The Allies had developed sensors and tactics that could detect us from afar, while our own systems were limited to short-range detection, rendering us vulnerable in the open Atlantic's vast expanses. Meanwhile, the mental and emotional toll of the war on German officers intensified as circumstances grew darker. One such officer, Henker's interrogation took a sinister turn when he was falsely accused of war crimes, specifically, abuses involving survivors of the liner SS Ceramic, which had been sunk by the U-boat U-515 in December of 1942. The accusations, and the threat of extradition to Britain to face trial, strained Henker's psyche, pushing him into deeper despair. On June 15 of 1944, in an act of desperate defiance, Henker attempted to escape from Fort Hunt by scaling the perimeter fence. His attempt ended tragically when guards shot him down, making him the sole prisoner during the entire course of the war to attempt an escape from that facility. His death marked a somber chapter in wartime prison history, underscoring the hopelessness and pressure faced by those imprisoned within. Contrastingly, Oberleutnant II Herbert Wehrer was one of the few who survived the war's brutalities. Having served aboard 5 different U-boat vessels, including surviving the sinkings of the U-612 in August of 1942 and the U-415 in July of 1944. His wartime experiences provided a unique perspective. His personal memoir, titled Iron Coffins, published in 1969, became one of the most widely acclaimed and respected accounts of the German submarine war, offering insight from the German perspective on the battles beneath the waves. Wierer vividly described the profound psychological strain inflicted by fighting against an enemy equipped with vastly superior technology. He noted that after May of 1943, every patrol became less about strategic advantage and more about sheer survival. The formidable Allied radar systems could detect the subtle disturbances created by a U-boat's periscope wake, the exhaust from snorkels, and even the moving shadow of a conning tower, detectable through the wash it generated. As a result, German submariners found themselves submerged far longer than the vessels had been originally designed to endure, often breathing in the foul, stale air within their cramped interiors, conserving their limited battery power, and only surfacing when their fuel and oxygen supplies were critically depleted. The Atlantic Ocean, which the Germans had dominated in the early years of the war, had now transformed into a deadly adversary, more threatening than even the heavily armed British destroyers. It concealed Allied aircraft above the thick fog banks and ships lurking beyond the horizon, while simultaneously revealing every move made by the U-boats to enemies wielding advanced technological tools that provided them with an overwhelming tactical advantage. The Germans found themselves hunted by an unseen force, their enemies' detection systems leaving no room for surprise. They were forced to operate under the constant threat of attack, knowing that the enemy could strike at any moment without warning. Among the notable figures to survive the relentless campaign was Captain Peter Erich Kramer of U-333. He commanded this vessel through a series of successful patrols and was one of the few senior U-boat commanders to emerge from the ordeal alive. Kramer's memoir, published under the title U-Boat Commander, a periscope view of the Battle of the Atlantic by the Naval Institute Press in 1984, offered another invaluable perspective on the technological revolution that ultimately defeated the U-boat fleet. His detailed accounts shed light on the intense struggles faced beneath the ocean's surface and the crucial role that technological innovation played in turning the tide of the war. Kramer vividly recalled a specific patrol in June of 1943, shortly after the German withdrawal from the North Atlantic operations. His boat was assigned to patrol off the coast of Africa, targeting isolated vessels away from heavily defended air routes. Despite the vastness of the ocean, Allied aircraft appeared with uncanny frequency, a testament to the relentless aerial patrols and advanced detection capabilities. One particular afternoon, the crew descended into enemy territory, its crew likely unaware that their aircraft's radar warning system, known as Naxos, was already obsolete in the face of advancing Allied technology. For nearly 3 years, the Germans found themselves repeatedly outpaced by Allied innovations in radar and countermeasures, often only just managing to stay one step ahead, or at least not two. Their technological efforts, driven by urgency and desperation, ultimately failed to shift the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic, which had been decisively lost for Germany for more than a year by that point. The ordeal of operating beneath the waves was relentless and perilous. Our submarine had been forced to descend 6 hours below the surface, far beyond the safe operational limits designed for extended submerged endurance. During these depths, we relied on sonar and other detection methods, yet the enemy's aircraft or ships remained a constant threat. When we attempted to surface, carefully emerging to breathe fresh air through the snorkel, the very same aircraft or another enemy craft would appear again within minutes, forcing us rapidly back down into the darkness of the depths. This harrowing cycle persisted for no less than 14 hours, a continuous pattern of diving and surfacing driven by exhaustion and dwindling power. Our batteries grew dangerously close to depletion, leaving us with a stark choice: risk surfacing again or surrender to the suffocating darkness. Each time we surfaced, we found the enemy aircraft waiting patiently for us, expertly positioned to strike at any glimpse of light or movement. Our only salvation from being engulfed in an attack was an intense burst of anti-aircraft fire, which, coupled with a desperate, deep crash dive, nearly tore apart the pressure hull and saved our lives. Throughout this ordeal, we did not manage to launch a single torpedo against our adversaries. We spent weeks upon weeks trying to evade detection, our hope hinging on stealth and cunning rather than firepower. Our efforts to achieve a decisive strike were continually thwarted by the Allies' mastery of the technological battlefield. Their radar, sonar, and electronic warfare equipment far surpassed our own, rendering even our most basic missions exceedingly difficult. As the war dragged on into the years of 1943 and 1944, German engineers relentlessly pursued countermeasures against the Allied technological dominance. One of their notable endeavors was the development of the LMS-10 magnetron, which was essentially a direct copy of the British CV-64 design. By May of 1943, at least 4 units of this magnetron had been delivered. Yet, production was severely hampered by shortages of critical materials, chiefly cobalt, which was indispensable for manufacturing permanent magnets. Many of the initial units were built using salvaged magnets from captured aircraft, making large-scale or reliable production impossible. In response, the German technological efforts didn't halt there. Telefunken, one of Germany's leading firms, embarked on developing an indigenous magnetron, designated LMS-12, in an attempt to adapt the British design to the materials available domestically. Unfortunately, this adaptation process was protracted and complex. It was only by April of 1944 that the LMS-12 saw limited production, but by then, the war's balance had already been irreversibly shifted. The Battle of the Atlantic had been decisively lost for Germany almost a year prior, and the dwindling numbers of magnetrons produced, estimated to total just a few hundred across all variants by the war's end, contrasted sharply with the Allied triumphs, which involved tens of thousands of such devices. The disparity in industrial capacity and raw materials was stark and unbridgeable. While the Germans struggled to produce even a fraction of the Allied magnetrons, the Allies' production capabilities and resource availability allowed them to outpace German technological development significantly. Allied radar systems, especially those operating at centimetric wavelengths like 3 centimeters, further widened the technological gap, rendering many German countermeasures ineffective. For example, radar warning receivers, designed to alert aircraft or ships to incoming radar signals, were developed in parallel efforts, with prototypes like the NAX system. The Fuji 350 NAX-C for aircraft and the FMBB-7 NAX-U for ships were both introduced in September of 1943. These systems aimed to detect U-boat and aircraft radars operating at 9.1 cm wavelength, such as the Allied ASV Mark III radar. In theory, this could have improved German awareness of incoming threats. However, by the time these warning systems entered operational service, the Allies had already advanced beyond their capabilities. The Allies had developed even shorter wavelength radars, notably at 3 centimeters, exemplified by the H-2X radar used by American forces and the advanced variants of the H-2S system. These systems rendered the German warning receivers, like Naxos, obsolete before they could be effectively deployed on a widespread scale. The relentless march of technological progress meant that the Germans were often perpetually a generation behind. Their efforts to develop countermeasures were frequently too late or too limited to make a significant difference. For example, a Junkers J-88 night fighter equipped when the submarine finally touched down at RAF Woodbridge, it carried with it a substantial array of advanced German equipment, including the Fuji 350 NAX-Z system, Fensburg homing devices, and the Liechtenstein SN-2 radar. The crew, however, had become disoriented during their mission, mistakenly believing they were approaching a German base rather than a British installation, which underscores the intensity and confusion often inherent in covert operations. Once on the ground, British technical intelligence immediately seized the opportunity to examine and analyze this captured hardware, gaining crucial insights into the capabilities and limitations of German electronic warfare and detection systems. The detailed inspection revealed that although German engineering was undeniably sophisticated, and the NAX system operated as intended, it remained primarily a defensive measure rather than an offensive one. Specifically, the NAX system was designed to serve as an early warning tool, capable of alerting German ships and aircraft of incoming Allied radar emissions. It could effectively detect signals from the first generation of Allied centimetric radar operating at approximately 9.1 centimeters in wavelength. However, it fell short against the newer, more powerful 3-centimeter systems that the Allies had begun deploying already, which rendered the German system less effective against the most modern Allied radar technology. To counteract the escalating Allied radar superiority, the German Navy embarked on tactical innovations, including equipping some of their boats with additional anti-aircraft armament. In particular, certain boats, referred to as flak boats, were equipped with quad-mounted 20mm anti-aircraft guns and heavily reinforced armor designed for anti-aircraft defense. The strategic thinking behind this modification was predicated on the belief that if submarines or other vessels could not evade radar-equipped aircraft, they should instead confront them directly on the surface, engaging with their anti-aircraft guns. Yet, in practice, this approach proved to be catastrophically ineffective. Allied aircraft, possessing superior speed and maneuverability, could detect the U-boat from ranges far exceeding the reach of their anti-aircraft weapons, often approaching from angles that minimized the submarine's ability to respond effectively, such as from behind the sun or through cloud cover. This tactic left the U-boat crews only precious seconds to man their guns and attempt a defense, often with little success. Furthermore, the speed advantage enjoyed by Allied aircraft meant they could choose the most advantageous approach and attack from a position of superiority, while the stationary U-boat units simply waited to be targeted. During these attacks, radio transmissions from the aircraft under attack frequently brought additional support, including surface warships capable of engaging and destroying the stationary submarines with ease. The flak boat program, intended as a countermeasure, ultimately cost more submarines in lost ships and crews than it prevented in enemy aircraft casualties, illustrating yet another tactical failure driven by an underestimating of the Allies' technological edge. Amidst these challenges, Germany sought to develop new countermeasures against Allied technological advancements. One such innovation was the introduction of acoustic homing torpedoes, known by the code names Zankönig-Ren and designated G7ES or T5. These torpedoes, introduced in September of 1943, were designed to home in on the propeller noise emitted by escort vessels, primarily the convoy protection ships, and, in theory, allowed U-boats to sink their targets before turning their attention to the merchant ships themselves. The first batch of approximately 80 torpedoes was delivered by the beginning of August of 1943, and large-scale deployment commenced against the convoys designated ONS 18 and 2022 in late September, marking a significant escalation in German anti-escort tactics. Initial results from these acoustic torpedoes appeared promising. Several escorts were damaged or sunk early on, raising hopes that they could effectively neutralize the Allied convoy defense. However, the Allies quickly responded with countermeasures, notably the development and deployment of the Foxer noisemaker, a decoy device towed behind ships designed specifically to attract and divert acoustic torpedoes away from their real targets. This technological cat-and-mouse game rapidly evolved, diminishing the effectiveness of the German torpedoes. More fundamentally, the limitations of acoustic homing torpedoes stemmed from the German inability to accurately locate convoy formations in the first place. If Allied radar systems detected the U-boats well before they could approach the convoys, the homing torpedoes offered no advantage, as the initial detection and targeting phase precluded any meaningful engagement. Recognizing these shortcomings, German engineers began exploring further adaptive measures, such as the development of submarines equipped with snorkel systems, allowing submerged vessels to operate at periscope depth and breathe air without surfacing completely, a method that would reduce their visibility to radar and other detection systems. This innovation, a Dutch invention first conceived in 1938, was ultimately acquired by the Germans when the Netherlands was overrun in 1940. Although initially dismissed or overlooked, the potential of snorkel systems to enhance submarine survivability and operational flexibility prompted a re-evaluation. German engineers started testing snorkel installations on submer in the summer of 1943. The German Kriegsmarine began to implement significant modifications to their underwater fleet, aiming to enhance operational capabilities during the ongoing Battle of the Atlantic. By early 1944, a new technological advancement was increasingly being incorporated into submarines: the snorkel. This device allowed submarines to keep their diesel engines running while submerged at periscope depth, enabling them to recharge batteries and transit covertly without the need to surface fully. The introduction of the snorkel represented a strategic shift, offering a way to reduce the vulnerability of submarines to increasingly vigilant Allied radar-equipped aircraft. However, despite its promising advantages, the snorkel was far from a perfect solution. While it enabled submarines to remain submerged for longer periods, it also had notable drawbacks. For instance, the snorkel's silhouette remained visible to radar systems, especially in calm sea conditions where the air intake and exhaust masts created a detectable wake. Moreover, the snorkel installation limited the submarine's maximum speed to just a few knots, restricting maneuverability and making them easier targets if detected. Navigating rough seas posed additional challenges, as large waves washing over the snorkel head would activate automatic valves, which momentarily cut off air supply. This could lead to sudden and dangerous pressure fluctuations within the vessel, complicating operations and increasing risks for the crew. Despite these limitations, by mid-1944, approximately half of the submarines operating from French bases had been fitted with snorkels, marking a significant, though not decisive, improvement in their survivability. While the snorkel contributed to marginally enhanced endurance and stealth capabilities, it was ultimately insufficient to alter the broader strategic landscape. Submarines equipped with snorkels could evade some attacking aircraft and surface ships temporarily, but they remained incapable of sinking enough Allied merchant ships to effectively disrupt the vital logistics that sustained the Allied war effort. The fundamental strategic defeat was already sealed. The Battle of the Atlantic had been decisively lost, Germany's U-boat fleet could no longer influence the outcome significantly, despite technological upgrades. In Germany's relentless pursuit of technological innovation, the most ambitious project was the development of the Type 21 electro-boot, also known as the electro-boot. This class of submarines embodied the pinnacle of German engineering, designed to regain the technological edge lost in previous years. The Type 21 featured a streamlined hull form, drastically reducing hydrodynamic drag, as well as a vastly increased battery capacity to sustain longer submerged operations. Its submerged speed was an impressive 17.2 knots, more than double the 6.5 knots achieved by the earlier Type 7 submarines. The new design incorporated 6 bow torpedo tubes with hydraulic reload mechanisms, enabling the crew to fire up to 18 torpedoes in less than 20 minutes. A remarkable feat for a submarine of that era. Additionally, the electro-boot was equipped with sophisticated sonar systems, providing enhanced detection and targeting capabilities. Theoretically, the Type 21 could outrun most surface escorts when submerged and could remain underwater for extended durations, potentially transforming the dynamics of underwater warfare. Had this revolutionary design entered service in 1943 instead of 1945, it might have significantly prolonged the Battle of the Atlantic, providing Germany with a tangible technological advantage. However, the rushed production process introduced severe manufacturing defects and quality control issues. Out of a total of 118 submarines built, only 4 were fully operational and ready for combat before the war's end. In the final months of the conflict, just 2 of these vessels undertook combat patrols, neither of which succeeded in sinking any Allied ships before Germany surrendered. The last patrol of a Type 21 electro-boot encapsulated both the promise and the futility of German technological efforts at that late stage of the war. The submarine in question was the U-2511, which departed on the 30th of April, 1945, under the command of corvette Captain Adelbert Schnee. Schnee was one of Germany's most experienced and successful U-boat commanders, and his vessel was expected to demonstrate the cutting-edge capabilities of the new class. During its patrol, the U-2511 exemplified the remarkable potential of the Type 21. On the 4th of May, 1945, the submarine detected a British cruiser task force, and in a masterful display of naval tactics, executed an attack approach that brought it within firing range without detection, despite the extensive Allied radar coverage. The submarine's superior submerged speed and silent running capabilities allowed it to close in stealthily, positioning itself for a strike. Yet, in a poignant act of restraint and the realization of the broader context, Captain Schnee chose not to fire torpedoes. By this point, Germany had already announced its intention to surrender, and the hostilities were drawing to a close. Recognizing the futility of further combat, Schnee surfaced, broadcast his position, and effectively ended the war effort of the electro-boot fleet, not through violence, but through acceptance of defeat. By the year 2004, the Allied forces had already secured victory, thanks largely to the immense strides made in industrial production and technological innovation during the years of 2042 and 2043. These advancements played a crucial role in tipping the scales decisively in their favor before many believed victory was even within reach. It was only after a series of relentless developments that the Allies unlocked their most sophisticated technological advantages, arriving at a point when the outcome of the war had already been largely determined against them. An in-depth statistical review of the historic Battle of the Atlantic vividly illustrates how pivotal the introduction of the cavity magnetron truly was in early 2043. This breakthrough in radar technology dramatically transformed the maritime conflict. Between the months of January and May of that year, during the initial phase when the first-generation ASV Mark III radar was in the process of deployment, yet before it had become fully operational and provided complete coverage, the submarine Hunter U-boat sank a staggering 245 merchant ships. These ships collectively carried around 1,289,000 tons of vital supplies, fuel, and equipment, demonstrating the intense toll on Allied maritime logistics during this period. German losses in this same interval were substantial, consisting of 95 U-boats, many of which were destroyed in May alone, a month that saw between 41 and 43 U-boats lost in a series of devastating confrontations. This high attrition rate underscored the mounting pressure on German naval operations during that phase of the war. Moving forward to the period spanning June of 1943 through May of 1944, a remarkable reversal in fortunes took place. By this time, centimetric radar technology had been integrated into the majority of both Allied aircraft and ships operating in the Atlantic, providing a significant technological edge. As a result, merchant ship losses during this period declined to a total of 185 ships, which amounted to roughly 819,000 tons. A notable decrease despite the fact that more U-boats were at sea than during the earlier months. Conversely, German losses during this same timeframe surged to 237 U-boats, illustrating a fundamental shift in the dynamics of the Battle of the Atlantic. The once advantageous position of the German submarine fleet had been critically undermined. To put this in perspective, in March of 1943, when the German U-boat fleet, or U-boat as they were called, was at the height of its efficacy, Germany sank 82 merchant ships in the Atlantic alone, amounting to 476,000 tons, and an additional 120 ships globally totaling roughly 693,000 tons. During that same month, the Germans lost just 12 U-boats, highlighting the intense and dangerous nature of their operations during the peak period. By the summer of that year, once the widespread deployment of centimetric radar technology had become a reality, the tide had turned decisively. In typical months following this technological breakthrough, the number of merchant ships sunk in the Atlantic fell to fewer than 20, while U-boat losses continued to remain in the double digits but with a much higher rate of destruction for the Germans. This marked a grim reality. The tonnage war, which aimed at crippling the enemy's supply chain, had become unwinnable for Germany. The battles involving convoy escorts in May of 1943 represented what could be seen as Germany's final chance to secure a strategic victory in the vast Atlantic theater. The German military's efforts to counteract the rapidly advancing Allied technology became painfully evident during the examination of the Rotterdam device in February of 1943. This discovery confirmed what many German commanders had suspected but desperately wished to deny: that Allied technological capabilities had advanced far beyond what they could comprehend or counteract. The technological gap had created detection advantages so significant that no amount of tactical skill, operational bravery, or innovative tactics could bridge it. Following the war, Allied technical teams meticulously analyzed the captured U-boat devices, revealing a series of desperate and often ineffective improvisations aimed at mitigating the power of Allied radar. Some U-boats had been coated with experimental radar-absorbent materials, crude, makeshift attempts at stealth that were heavy and detrimental to performance, while providing only negligible reductions in radar reflection. The available materials in Germany during 1943 and 1944 proved insufficient for effective absorption of centimetric radar waves, which operate at extremely short wavelengths and require specialized coatings that were not yet developed at that time. Other U-boats carried inflatable decoy balloons designed to confuse radar detection by mimicking the presence of a submarine, tactics that occasionally succeeded but had significant limitations. These decoys could not be deployed when the submarine was submerged or in rough seas, greatly reducing their tactical utility. Some submarines were also fitted with modified exhaust systems aimed at reducing the radar signature of snorkel emissions, yet these, no matter the conditions, be it relentless weather, thick darkness, or the need for evasive maneuvers, sinking below the surface and remaining fully submerged was considered the only reliable method of safeguarding oneself. Yet, during the years of 1943 and 1944, the limitations of battery technology severely constrained the potential for prolonged underwater operations. Such operations would have been necessary for submarines to avoid detection altogether, but the existing technological capabilities did not support this level of stealth for extended periods. As a result, German submarines found themselves ensnared by the very constraints of their technological advancements. These vessels, despite their formidable appearance, were ultimately exposed to enemies they could not effectively detect or evade, making them vulnerable to a range of weaponry that they could neither counter nor outmaneuver. Furthermore, they had to operate within an electromagnetic battlefield where the Allies held decisive dominance, wielding advanced detection and interception tools that rendered German submarines almost defenseless. The psychological toll on German naval personnel, documented extensively through interrogations, letters, and post-war memoirs, provides perhaps the most persuasive evidence of how the advent of the cavity magnetron, an innovation in radar technology, was a turning point that decisively influenced the course of the war. It is crucial to recognize that these German sailors and officers were not individuals seeking to justify their failures or to complain about setbacks. They were highly trained experts, well aware of the technical shortcomings and vulnerabilities in their systems. Their testimonies consistently highlight that the core issue was not tactical misjudgments or operational errors, but rather a fundamental technological deficiency, one that rendered their equipment obsolete in the face of rapidly advancing Allied innovations. The Germans described their growing sense of helplessness as they confronted an enemy equipped with detection tools of a vastly superior nature, tools that made German submarines effectively invisible, silent, and undetectable. This knowledge fostered a deep sense of fatalism among crews, who understood that avoidance of detection was increasingly out of their control and that the chances of survival depended more on luck than on skill or tactical prowess. The morale of these crews deteriorated as they transitioned from confident defenders of the Atlantic to prey hunted relentlessly by Allied forces, a shift driven not by battlefield defeat per se but by a technological revelation that exposed their vulnerabilities. In February of 1943, when Wilhelm Rune carefully examined the Rotterdam device in his laboratory, he conducted what could be described as a forensic autopsy on German naval strategy itself. The copper block he used in his experiments symbolized an insight into the underlying problems faced by the German Navy, namely, the persistent mystery behind the loss of ships like the U-boat, the seemingly inexplicable interception of aircraft, and the inability to protect convoys effectively. This device, the cavity magnetron, unveiled a critical truth. Germany had been effectively fighting the Battle of the Atlantic while deaf and blind to the electromagnetic spectrum, which the Allies exploited with devastating precision. This discovery shattered the illusion of German technological dominance more profoundly than any single battlefield defeat could. It fundamentally altered German confidence in their strategic superiority, showing that the Allies' progress in radar technology was not only real but potentially surpassing German understanding across multiple domains. If British scientists could develop revolutionary radar systems in secret, while enduring years of strategic bombing, then the Germans faced the frightening possibility that their enemies might have capabilities they had yet to uncover or counter. This realization eroded the belief that German technological prowess was insurmountable and opened a chasm of uncertainty in the minds of military leaders. The psychological repercussions of this revelation proved to be just as damaging as any physical defeat. The once assured belief in their invincibility was replaced with doubt, prompting the Germans to divert scarce resources into countermeasures that arrived too late to alter the war's ultimate outcome. Post-rotation intelligence assessments reflected this shift, with commanders adopting more cautious stances, always assuming that the Allies possessed weapons and techniques beyond the current scope of German knowledge. By the fall of 1943, Allied efforts had borne significant fruit, as rapidly produced models of centimetric radar were being installed on hundreds of aircraft and ships. These radar systems operated at a wavelength of about 1 centimeter, making them markedly more precise and capable of detecting enemy vessels and aircraft with unprecedented accuracy. The development and deployment of these advanced radars marked a turning point, transforming the electromagnetic battlefield into an area where German submarines and aircraft could no longer operate with the same impunity they once enjoyed. Starting in 1941, an innovative radar system that employed cavity magnetron technology was progressively deployed on convoy escort vessels. This early warning apparatus drastically improved the ability of these ships to detect submerged submarines when they were on the surface, with detection ranges reaching up to 20 kilometers, and to identify periscopes at distances of approximately 900 yards. Operating at a wavelength of about 9.7 centimeters and capable of delivering peak power of 70,000 watts, this radar system marked a significant leap forward in maritime defense capabilities. Meanwhile, beginning in March of 1943, the Royal Air Force's Coastal Command began equipping their aircraft with the Air-to-Surface Vessel Mark III radar, an airborne system that transformed aerial reconnaissance and anti-submarine warfare. This radar enabled crews to monitor vast areas, thousands of square kilometers, in all weather and lighting conditions, thus providing a strategic advantage that made it possible to locate enemy submarines regardless of weather obscurities or darkness. The operational range and sensitivity of these systems were pivotal in turning the tide in the naval battles across the Atlantic. Around the same period, the United States introduced its own advanced radar technology known as the H-2X, often called the American H-2S, which operated at a shorter wavelength of approximately 3 centimeters. This upgrade provided bomber crews with a dual purpose: precise navigation and effective targeting, crucial for the strategic bombing campaigns that aimed to cripple enemy industrial capacity. These radar systems collectively stemmed from the revolutionary cavity magnetron technology, which had been examined and refined by scientists such as Runge in early 1943. The development and deployment of the Rotterdam device, an earlier radar innovation, had been instrumental in establishing Allied electromagnetic dominance over the battlefield. This technological edge compelled Germany to allocate enormous resources in attempts to develop countermeasures. Yet, these efforts yielded limited operational results and often diverted critical scientific expertise and industrial capacity away from offensive weapon systems. Consequently, German efforts to counteract Allied radar advantages, such as the NACO's Radar Warning Receiver program, required significant human and material investment that offered only marginal tactical benefits. German research into underwater detection and propulsion systems shifted focus toward more sophisticated designs. Recognizing the need to operate effectively beneath the waves, the Germans experimented with various technological innovations, including underwater television systems, passive sonar arrays capable of detecting targets without active emission, and hydrogen peroxide engines intended to power submarines with greater speed and endurance. Despite the potential of these exotic technologies, none reached operational deployment before the end of the war. They represented the pinnacle of German engineering, efforts to solve problems created by Allied technological advances, and to develop countermeasures that might have reversed the tide had they been successfully implemented on a broader scale. The overall narrative of the Battle of the Atlantic is one of overwhelming industrial effort and relentless innovation, combined with tactical skill and naval courage. During the conflict, Germany commissioned approximately 1,181 U-boat submarines. Of these, only a fraction, about 785, were destroyed, with 648 lost directly to enemy action. The remaining vessels were subjected to scuttling, accidents, or decommissioning, leaving only around 156 to surrender in May of 1945. The human cost of this naval campaign was staggering. Some 40,000 men served aboard U-boat submarines, with approximately 30,000 losing their lives in the line of duty. This represented a casualty rate of around 75%, an extraordinarily high figure compared to other military services involved in the conflict. These sailors fought with exceptional bravery and technical skill under perilous circumstances, demonstrating resilience that remains a testament to their dedication. Yet, despite their extraordinary valor, these crews could not overcome the fundamental technological edge that Allied radar systems provided. The cavity magnetron, developed at Birmingham University between 1939 and 1940, and subsequently refined by the General Electric Company for military applications, was arguably the most groundbreaking technological breakthrough of the entire war. Its innovation extended well beyond military use, forming the basis for a suite of microwave technologies that would influence civilian life for decades to come, fundamentally transforming communications, radar, and eventually, everyday electronics. Following the end of World War II, the advancements made in communication technologies rapidly transformed the modern world. Innovations in television broadcasting, the advent of satellite communications, and even the widespread adoption of microwave ovens in kitchens around the globe can trace their origins back to this pivotal period. The extensive industrial expertise gained through the manufacturing of magnetrons, vacuum tubes that generated high-frequency microwaves, paved the way for a technological revolution during the mid-20th century. This breakthrough not only revolutionized consumer appliances but also directly contributed to the development of a new era in electronics during the 1950s and 1960s, fueling innovation across multiple industries. The cooperation between British and American scientists, exemplified notably by the sharing of magnetron technology during the Tizard mission in the year 1940, set a precedent for international scientific collaboration that persisted throughout the Cold War and well beyond. This partnership demonstrated the importance of open exchange of critical technological advancements, fostering a collective effort to accelerate progress and maintain strategic superiority. The decision to deploy this groundbreaking technology, despite the inherent risks of enemy capture and potential sabotage, reflected a profound understanding within military circles that the advantages gained from such innovations far outweighed the dangers involved. The cavity magnetron, in particular, proved to be a game-changer. Its capabilities showed that maintaining a significant operational edge through advanced technology was often more valuable than safeguarding secrecy at all costs, especially if industrial capacity could produce the technology in sufficient quantities to prevent the adversary from catching up. This insight influenced military policy across Western nations, guiding development from the jet age through the nuclear era and into the burgeoning information age. The strategic choice to rapidly field new capabilities, accepting that enemies would eventually develop countermeasures or replicate the innovations, proved more effective than attempts to keep technologies strictly confined within laboratories and secret vaults. In a stark contrast to these technological triumphs, the story of the German U-boat force came to an end in surrender and destruction. On May 4, in the year 1945, Grand Admiral Donitz, who had temporarily assumed the role of German head of state following Adolf Hitler's suicide near the end of April, issued an order for the entire U-boat fleet to cease offensive operations immediately. Following Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, the Allies launched Operation Deadlight, an effort to neutralize the remaining German submarines. Commanders at sea were instructed to surface their submarines, fly black flags as a sign of surrender, and proceed to designated Allied-controlled ports. However, many of these commanders chose a different course. They opted to scuttle their vessels rather than surrender them. Their refusal stemmed from a deep sense of loyalty and the memories of fallen comrades, dictating that these submarines, the same vessels that had fought fiercely in the Atlantic, should be destroyed rather than handed over. The operational order, an echo of the historic scuttling of the German High Seas Fleet at Scarpa Flow in 1919, resulted in more than 200 U-boat submarines being deliberately sunk by their own crews. This act of destruction was not driven by mere patriotism but was rooted in the recognition that surrender would mean relinquishing a technological marvel that had, in many ways, determined the outcome of the conflict. The crews involved, many of whom had lost comrades and faced extreme peril, had fought a campaign dictated not just by tactics or bravery, but by physics and engineering principles. Their defeat was ultimately dictated by electromagnetic radiation, a form of energy produced by magnetic fields generated within compact copper components, manufactured in British factories and integrated into Allied aircraft and naval vessels. Due to severe shortages of raw materials, Allied bombing campaigns targeting industrial centers, and the overall industrial limitations faced by Nazi Germany, the German war effort could never match the sheer scale and sophistication of Allied electromagnetic technology. The crucial breakthrough came with the capture and examination of a single radar set in February of 1943. This discovery revealed the profound electromagnetic advantage held by the Allies and served as a turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. It became clear that the Germans had been fighting a kind of blindness, unable to see the enemy's position and movements, while the Allies possessed a clear technological vision. The electromagnetic dimension of warfare had decisively shifted the tide in favor of the Allies. Both statistical data and detailed technological analyses reached the same inescapable conclusion. The cavity magnetron had transformed the naval and aerial battlespace in ways that no tactical innovation or strategic decision could have achieved alone. Its impact was so significant that, after the war, Allied scientists often celebrated the magnetron's role in shaping victory. They frequently quoted a famous remark, attributed to the recognition of the magnetron's crucial contribution, emphasizing that this small but powerful device had been instrumental in turning the tide during a critical phase of the conflict. In essence, the deployment and rapid dissemination of the cavity magnetron exemplified the broader principle that technological breakthroughs, when strategically harnessed, can redefine the course of history. whether through enabling the Allies to decrypt and locate German U. The story of the development and deployment of radar technology during World War II is intricately linked to the pioneering work of British physicist Sir John Randall and his colleagues at Birmingham University, where fundamental research into microwave physics laid the groundwork for what would become a revolutionary military tool. This research culminated in the creation of the cavity magnetron, a device that would transform the battlefield by providing a means to generate high-frequency microwaves, essential for effective radar operation. The magnetron's widespread manufacturing, with tens of thousands produced across American and British factories, enabled its rapid deployment in critical areas of the Atlantic and beyond. Luis Alvarez, an American physicist involved with radar development at the Radiation Laboratory at MIT, famously stated that the cavity magnetron was the key factor that turned the tide of the Second World War. He believed that this technology secured a decisive victory in the Battle of the Atlantic, the aerial confrontations over Germany, and ultimately, the entire conflict. While simplifying a complex web of historical causality, Alvarez's assertion was rooted in the compelling technical evidence demonstrating that the magnetron's contributions were indeed pivotal. Without centimetric radar operating at wavelengths of a few centimeters, the Allied forces would have faced significantly higher losses in their convoys throughout the years of 2043 and 2044. Furthermore, the deployment of radar-equipped aircraft provided essential air cover that limited German operations in areas beyond the reach of shore-based patrols. Without the detection advantage granted by magnetron technology, preparations for D-Day would have been far more vulnerable. The massive logistical buildup necessary for the Normandy invasion depended heavily on radar to detect and thwart submarine interdiction, which threatened to disrupt the vital supply chains. The significance of the magnetron was not just in its immediate military utility but also in its origins, arising from basic research into microwave physics, which was then turned into practical applications by industrial manufacturing at scale. This electromagnetic advantage created a persistent and wide-ranging coverage of crucial ocean regions, gradually tightening around German naval forces. As a result, the German Navy found itself increasingly hamstrung, unable to operate effectively without risking detection and destruction. In early February of 1943, a German examination of a captured radar set at Telefunken headquarters was less an analysis of the device's function and more an autopsy, exposing the enemy's recognition that they had encountered a technological leap. By the time German scientists fully grasped the scope of Allied advancements, the strategic outcome had already been sealed. This episode of technological espionage, exemplified by the so-called Rotterdam device, transcended mere radar development, illustrating how scientific progress, when scaled industrially, could decisively influence warfare. The broader lesson lies in understanding that advanced technology confers an insurmountable advantage against opponents lacking similar scientific and industrial capacity. In this context, the electromagnetic capabilities crafted by Allied engineers and scientists transformed the nature of warfare, turning once invisible threats into detectable forces. The psychological impact was profound. Enemies faced with such capabilities lost confidence, transforming from confident aggressors into vulnerable prey. The revelation that a simple piece of copper, just 8 centimeters in diameter and meticulously machined with 8 resonant cavities surrounding a cathode, could alter history exemplifies how scientific ingenuity can make the invisible visible and the clandestine exposed. The Germans, both admirals and scientists, who examined the captured radar set comprehended with stark clarity that they had witnessed not merely a technological marvel but a harbinger of defeat. The irrefutable mathematics and unforgiving physics underpinning the device's operation were inescapable. the strategic implications were unavoidable. Returning from Berlin, these experts carried knowledge that even the most formidable German submarines and bravest crews could not surmount the electromagnetic advantage that Allied science and industry had at their command. Despite the understanding that victory was slipping away, the Germans continued to fight out of duty, even as hope diminished slowly over time. They pressed on, aware that their enemies wielded a technological edge that was insurmountable in many respects, yet driven by a sense of obligation and resilience. Their struggle exemplified the tragic irony of technological superiority. It was not merely a matter of weapons or tactics, but of the unseen powers of science and industrial strength shaping the very course of history itself. Through a recent investigation of just one isolated device, they were able to glimpse what the future might hold. This solitary analysis proved to be incredibly revealing, providing insights that pointed toward upcoming possibilities and potential developments. The findings from this single piece of equipment served as a window into what lies ahead, suggesting that the technology's trajectory and its broader implications could be more significant than initially imagined. In essence, the examination of this one device offered a glimpse into the future, illuminating paths that might soon become reality and shaping their understanding of what was to come.